As always, donate to Jumpstart. Jumpstart helps economically disadvantaged kids play team sports, which is something that's near and dear to Rachel and I's hearts. So if you go to the links in this description below, pretty much all the information that you will need to donate is there. So we really encourage you, if you can, to do so. Again, it's a great cause. We love Jumpstart. They are our charity of choice. If you can, please donate. We have a very special edition of Puck Social today because we have the one and only, the pride of East York, Ontario, Mr. Bruce Allen Boudreau. Bruce, how are you doing? Thank you so much for coming onto the show with us.
Well, I'm doing fine, thanks, but we got to correct it.
Uh-oh.
I'm from North York.
North York. My apologies. I'm also from North York, so I cannot believe I made that mistake already. Like sort of like Avenue and Lawrence area, like around there. Yeah.
I was Keelan Wilson, so.
Oh, okay. A little farther north.
Yeah.
Little fun fact right off the hop is Bruce went to the same school that my dad and like aunts and uncles went to, and like my grandparents live in the same like area before they like passed away. So I think one of the first times you and I spoke, we realized, hey, wait a minute, we kind of grew up like 2 minutes from each other.
It's a small world when you think about it, and as big as Toronto is, let alone the world, to be grown up in that same area. And it's changed an awful lot since I was there. I know that much for sure.
They say Toronto's the biggest small town in the world. I would say we're right up there. Bruce, though, so I grew up, obviously, and Rachel and I were the same age, so we grew up watching, hockey. Obviously, that's why we're here. But a big thing that sort of stoked that love was HBO 24/7. I'm sure this gets brought up to you all the time, but I still say, like, it is still a seminal sort of dialect between my father and I of I believe it was, what was it, 24 F-bombs within like a 30-second or 45-second rant.
And you know what? With that whole thing, I know there was a lot, because if I do talks at coaching clinics or something, that's usually what they show before I get out there, and which is, now I go, when Jim Ralph first did it so many years ago, I mean, I was pretty embarrassed, but the whole idea of the thing was George McPhee had said, we want access to everything, give them total access. So, but when I went in there, we're basically losing 6 or 7 in a row. Not losses, but including shootouts and that. And we were approaching the game, and we were down 2-1, and we had just killed off a 5-on-3, and they were all looking dead. And so I asked the HBO guys. I said, "Okay, you guys, you have to leave. I'm gonna, probably say something I don't want to say." And they said, "No, we're allowed to stay." And I said, "Okay, here goes." And nothing was planned. Whatever came out of, I would tell the guys. On pretty well every team I've been on, at least once, I said, "Listen, I don't know what's coming out of my mouth next, but I'm going to start with this, and then let's just see where it goes." And that was basically that little rant. And yeah, there were a few F-bombs. There's no getting around it. My mom, when she saw the show, was not overly pleased, but I wasn't thinking of her at that moment.
I was going to ask how your mom dealt with it. That was my number one question.
Oh, she was mad. She said, "You swear way too much, blah, blah, blah." We can't have that, and next time you be nicer to the boys and everything else. And I'm going, "Yeah, Mom, you just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll try to keep doing what I'm doing, and we'll go from there."
It's so funny, though, because you see that, and Mike and I were pretty young. I think we were in high school when that happened. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward a number of years, I actually get to work with you. And one of the first things Mike texts me was, "I need to know how much Bruce swears." Mm-hmm. And I remember, through training camp, he's texting me, and I'm like, he hasn't sworn yet. This is not... it was so, now that I know you and I've worked with you, it was so out of character. And I feel like that makes it all the more funny, is that you come off in that episode as like almost like a Torts type where you get like really hot and like yelling and screaming, and then you work with you on a daily basis and you're like, no, you're like very, very easygoing in terms of the language that you use and like how you treat people. It's the complete opposite of that rant. And so for me, like seeing that and then working with you, I was like, is this same person?
Well,
It was
one thing,
really funny.
one thing, Rachel. I mean, when we were working together, it was. I think just to set the stage, it was. We all got together a month before training camp started because we wanted to make sure everything was right going into camp. We had come off a fairly successful year, so everything was positive. Now, if you had to talk to me a month after you left, then every word was every F-bomb in the world was coming out, and every other word that I knew, I'd be getting in the dressing room. Can you believe what effing? And so it was a little different. We were in a pretty positive mode before the season started, and then they changed up a couple things, as you recall, just before camp started. Like, for example, going from two groups to three groups. Like, I mean, we had set up.
That was a scramble.
Well, yeah, we had set the whole training camp up to be two groups, and then I think it was 2 or 3 days before camp started, they said, no, you got to do three groups. And so we were in a scramble because we had worked so hard, quite frankly, to make it perfect, that now we were in an ad-lib situation where you don't want to look like you're just ad-libbing, let alone going up to Whistler and not having the confines of our own building. We didn't know what we were getting into either way there. So it was a little more destructive doing that sort of thing. But you're right. For the most part, unless I'm talking hockey talk or dressing room talk, I'm pretty well using the rest of the English language okay.
Well, yeah, and you brought up training camp. I remember I had actually forgotten about that group 3 to group 2, but I think one of the other things that really threw us off was we didn't have a dressing room or a coaching office or anything because of the rink construction. So we're having these meetings and people from finance and the ticket office are walking by, and like people are coming poking their head in and out of the boardroom trying to figure out if they're allowed to hold a meeting there. And it's like, no, the coaching staff is in here. But when you think about it, not only were we probably not supposed to be there, then we're scrambling. There's stuff written on the whiteboard and you never know who's walking by who could say something. It kind of didn't it feel like a little bit like a fishbowl where anytime somebody would walk by, you'd kind of have to be like, oh, what's happening here?
You didn't know who was walking by. You didn't know who was sending them, which was probably the thing we talked about most. And then every day at some point in the day, Patrick or Jim would walk in and just look around and say, what are you doing? And we'd say for the 23rd straight day, well, we're working on camp and everything else. And they would just say, okay, and then leave. And so you didn't know if they were spying on you or wanting to encourage you or to help you. And every second day our room was moved. So when we'd leave the day, we would leave everything in that room, assuming, because we didn't want to take everything home with us every day. I mean, so assuming we'd be there the next day, and then you'd come out and you'd find, oh, we're in this room today. And I'd say, well, let's move everything to that room. And so, I mean, it was a little James Bondish almost, but I mean, I thought we did, quite frankly, an incredibly excellent job on preparing for camp before throwing into a little bit of a quagmire at the end. But anyway, that's me. Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
I would agree with you. I think we got through everything. Like, we got through systems. I think the thing that threw me most for a loop during that, I'm still trying to learn you Mike, Trent, Jason, Dylan, how everyone's kind of working and how I just kind of like fit in the corner and not say anything ever unless somebody needs computer help. But it was one of those things where you mentioned Jim or Patrick would come in and we would be trying to do the groups and we'd be trying to figure out, okay, who's best suited where, who are we going to pair with Quinn, and what are we going to do with whoever else, and who are we going to put in these groups to balance it off? And then they would come in and be like, no, put that guy there, put this guy there. And it's like, could we explain why we put them there in the first place? And then there was the conversation about, like, Quinn Hughes playing defense versus moving him up at some point, which was nuts.
Whoa. Hold on. What? That was a conversation that happened?
Well,
that was a conversation.
It happened 2 or 3 times. The first time that I recollect it was when somebody from management came down into my office and said, "Listen, have you ever thought of putting Quinn at center?" And I said, "No, I'm not putting him at center." I mean, at that point too, we had Pettersson, Horvat, and Miller. What are we're going to put Quinn 4th line center? And they asked it 2 or 3 different times. And I mean, Rachel had told me that when I first admitted it on TV, and people were having a hissy fit that the analytics people had said that in the summer. So I knew it wasn't coming from just, hey, I'm watching the games and this is what I think. This was coming from an analytical stage. So
yeah, and to be clear, that analytics stage was not me. I was firmly in the Bruce camp of we have Bo, we have Pettersson, we have Miller. We don't need to do that. And now you look at Quinn. He just won the Norris. He's at least in the top 2 defensemen in the league right now, if not the best. And, I mean, Bruce, he's the only guy on the back end right now that can move the puck. What would they do if you hadn't pushed back and said, oh yeah, I'll move Quinn Hughes to center? Like, I think about that now that I see him playing in the way that he is. I felt like it kind of contradicted their own opinions, didn't you?
You're right. I mean, they didn't like our exits in our zone, and they wanted to move the only defenseman at that time that could make an exit to a forward position, which was like the reason I didn't do it was, obviously we weren't very good. Like, I mean, we were competitive, but we weren't the best team in the NHL at that point in time. So, I mean, but it would have made me look quite foolish. And, I mean, so there was no way, like, that I would have gotten away with it as long as I did being there if I had done that move. But, I mean, it was, in their defense, they'll make a lot of suggestions. I mean, every GM makes suggestions to you. Every person that's your boss will make suggestions to you, and it's up to the coach to either say, you know what, that's something I didn't think of, I'm going to try it, or that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, and I'm just going to disregard it.
Would that be the craziest GM suggestion you've gotten in your coaching tenure?
I've had, had a few, but I mean, that's up there. When I look at Quinn Hughes right now, I mean, if the Canucks were ever to squeak in the playoffs, there's no doubt in my mind he deserves Hart Trophy nominations. And, other than Cale Makar, like, I mean, is there even somebody close to him? I mean, he gets more chances. He's impossible to stop. His edges are incredible. And, I mean, there's so many superlatives you can say about him. I mean, when I watch the Canucks play, I just can't believe that was even a suggestion.
So Bruce, let's flash back to the start of your tenure in Vancouver, because you came in. It was a pretty dour group at that point. Like, it was pretty rough. How did you turn that around? Like, what was your approach? The first thing you did, you walked through the door, and how did you? Because after like, it was the Bruce Boudreau effect. You guys came in, and then you ripped off a good run.
I'll be honest. I mean, I came in at the same time. Stan Smeal had a talk before I did, and he talked about the pride of the Canucks, and it was very special. It touched me really deeply. I mean, I've told Stan it was the best speech I've ever heard anybody give from the heart, and I think that resonated with the players. And then I was following, and I followed with positivity, and by saying I think we're better than we are. Our record shows. I mean, I look at around the room, and there's some really good players here. Blah 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 blah. And I mean, we played LA that first night, and we won 4-0. And I think that gave them the confidence, first of all, to shut a team out. I mean, Demko was really good, but we got goals. We got shorthanded goals. We were much more aggressive on the penalty kill, and everything was working fine. And then we were lucky enough to run off 7 wins in a row, and they got stronger every game. And I mean, in the 8th game, we lost in a shootout, and in LA, and and I really liked this player when he was healthy. But I mean, I went with my heart and put Tanner Pearson in the final shot. And if he had scored, we would have won. I figured Tanner Pearson coming from LA, this would be the thing. And he missed. And then they had Dustin Brown, who I coached, and gave me a wink after he scored too, which really bothered me because I really loved Dustin, and I know we had a really good relationship. But so that was how we started. But then they started to believe that they were good, and we continued on that stretch, and I'm positive we would have made the playoffs that year, except for the 1 week preceding the trade deadline, where we lost to Buffalo, Detroit, and Ottawa, and I think that was more because the word was out that we were trading everybody, and I think they were more concerned with that, very similar to what's going on now, I think, quite frankly, than just playing hockey. No matter, and I mean, it's hard to believe coaches sometimes, but when I would go in there and I'd tell them, I said, there's nobody getting traded on this team right now. And the only talk that they're talking about is maybe Luke Schenn. And Luke was right in the room. And I said, I don't want them to trade you. I'm doing everything we can not to trade you. So, I mean, but I think it affected guys like that had heard the Connor Garlands, the Millers, the Horvats, all of these guys. Besser thought that Tyler Myers thought that they were going to get traded, and I think it affected them that week. If we had had a good week there, we would have made the playoffs. But that was a fun year in Vancouver, and I was expecting the next year to be even better, but as it turned out, it didn't end up that way.
What's crazy is you say that, and that week leading up to trade deadline, I remember I was still back and forth to Toronto during then because I hadn't moved out there quite yet. And I remember being there for the games and the conversations that were being had. And it felt like you said the weight of the deadline was weighing on the players. But then at the same time in the front office, it was like, well, if we just win these 3 games, maybe we're not going to make those trades. And it's like you're setting everybody in the organization up for failure because you have the players thinking they're getting traded, they're squeezing their sticks a little harder, and therefore you're losing, when the reality is everybody knows Francesco wants you to make the playoffs even if it's in the 8th seed. And if maybe you took the weight off the players a little bit, and like you said, tell them, hey, we're not trading you, they maybe we get an extra 2 wins, and then like you say, maybe we're in a better position to make the playoffs, and some of those deals don't get made. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, I was watching that, and even if you look at the statistics, like the less shots on goal, giving up more from the middle, less physical, you could tell that they were playing with some level of weight. And I also don't think it helped that we had to play Demko, I think it was like 19 of 21 games down the stretch because we couldn't trust Halak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a couple bad games in games like 9 through 15 or something, and so it became difficult. And the next game we played him was, I think, the 3rd last or the 4th last game of the year. He went into Colorado and he was incredible, and he won. And then I played him another game, and then Demko actually, I think, was ailing, and so the problem then was Demko in the last couple games of the year, Halak got hurt, and that really when we needed those last 2 wins, I think at the end of the year, we were putting in Seelofs, who or it wasn't Seeloff, so I forget even it, and it wasn't Colin Delia. I don't even know who the third goalie was back then.
Oh, we didn't have Delia till the next year.
Yeah,
Spencer Martin?
It might have
maybe?
been Spencer Martin. No, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't have been him because he started off his career with 8 or 9 straight wins with us, and which set a record for a Vancouver goalie. Anyway, that being said, we didn't make it, and but it was a tremendously satisfying year in that we started from the bottom and we almost made it. So that's why during the course of that summer that I thought, okay, if we could make a couple additions, then we would have a great chance at making it. But thusly, it didn't happen.
So you mentioned what's going on with them right now. Let's just dive into that, I guess. And we cannot talk about what's going on with the Canucks right now without talking about Pettersson and Miller. It really does seem like a one or the other situation there right now. Obviously, there is a schism in that relationship that doesn't seem to be able to be mended. As someone, obviously, you were there, you saw that dynamic. What are you able to reveal about that to us?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just I've always felt, whether a coach is getting fired or whether a player is getting traded, that once the media gets a hold of it and it starts to grow, there's no pulling it back. That growth is going to be there and forever. And this talk keeps getting louder and louder. The only time it slows down a little bit is when they have a win, and they had a big win against Washington, so you haven't heard nothing this week. But if they were to lose tonight in St. Louis and then lose another game, I'm pretty sure something's going to happen. And I mean, you know what? And the biggest thing I've said is, listen, a coach's job is there's 23 different personalities, and you have to touch on the personality or the trait that's going to make them play the best. And sometimes it's a kick in the ass. Sometimes you got to give them a hug and a pat on the back. In the olden days, it was, and you'd always take ice time away, or you could fine them, or you could do, but it's my job as the coach to find out what works with each one of them. And I think in that year and a half, I mean, Miller was pretty tough. He's a tough guy, but as competitive as a guy you want, I was shocked at how good a player he was, and he had every component of being a great player. And he wanted one thing he wants, and I think that Petey both wants. They want to be the best, and I think there's almost a little, okay, I want to be the best, and I want to be the best, so I want the most ice time, or I want the most ice time. But either way, I mean, it worked. I mean, hell, that first year, Petey was playing right wing with Miller.
Yeah.
And they got 100 points. I mean, Miller had 99 points, and I played him 25 minutes in the 82nd game, and he got 1 point early, but he couldn't get another one. But those are things that happen. And I mean, I've been on a lot of teams in 50 years, and I can tell you this: not everybody always got along. There was guys that didn't like each other or what happened. But once you put the skates on, you're a teammate. And but they might not have ever gone to dinner with them. I've been with coaches where I knew this guy was a great coach. He was a great assistant coach. But I mean, I didn't like him and as a person. But I mean, you get in that room and you're a team together, you're vying to win. So I mean, but obviously it's kept going, and I don't know if it was leaked by anybody upstairs about their relationship, or to try to facilitate a trade. I have no idea on that. I mean, it's happened in the past. That's all I can tell you. With management leaking things, or to try to get their favorite reporter getting them a little bit of a scoop or something. So, but I don't know if that happened. But obviously, it's got to the point where if Vancouver doesn't end up very soon being in a solid playoff position, one of them is getting moved. And I mean, and they got two different dynamics. One, Petey's no trade doesn't kick in till this summer. I mean, I think it might be limited right now. JT's got a no trade, but now you're hearing rumors that he's the one that wanted to get out. So I don't know what's going on in there. I know they're both great players. I know when I first took the job and I said I got Pettersson, Miller, and Horvat down the middle. I got three of the best. I moved Petey to the wing though for that first year. So I mean, they're as talented as they can be. I just wish it would be more of a calming thing. Instead, the media in Vancouver doesn't have like anything calming. So I mean, anything that's there will blow right up. So.
And I look at it, like you said, you come in, you have Horvat, Miller, Pettersson, and I really felt like, I mean, there have been long issues between Miller and Pettersson, and like you said, not everyone's going to get along. But I feel like the dressing room, when it had Bo, when it had a guy like Luke Shen, even Ian Cole last year, Chris Tanev before you and I were there, it felt like those were guys that regardless of who was or wasn't getting along, they would always be the buffer. And it just seems like ever since particularly Bo has been out of the organization, number one, I mean, the conversations around choosing Bo or JT that summer were beyond anything. Like, I've never been a part of something like that. It was truly insane. The rationale that was being bandied about. But
well, what was that? Are you able to take us through that rationale a little bit?
It would be Rachel, because I wasn't in on that stuff.
So we have to sign one or the other. And we talk about Bo being, one, he's your captain, right? Mm-hmm. And like Bruce said, like, we're talking about a very important player, plays a two-way game, like, really well-rounded guy, excited to have him as a coach. And you got to pick because you want to re-sign Pettersson. And I kind of was like, okay, well, JT, I think, has a game that's probably going to fall off before Bo does. I was firmly on the re-sign Horvat side, and part of that was because I thought Miller could get more in a trade. And the trade offers that were being bandied about, that was true. Now, that was the year before the restricted free agent year. But I think, Bruce, kind of where I'm going is when you have the buffer of guys like Horvat and Shen, Tanev, really good leaders, and you lose those kind of bodies, voices from your dressing room, what impact does that have on the room? And is it potentially more problematic than people think it is?
Well, I mean, that year it wasn't problematic. The second year, when you were there full time, it was problematic because Bo knew he was gone because he was unsigned and they had signed Miller. So he was sort of more not as invested, if that makes any sense. The other guy that we didn't mention, who was the best buffer of them all, I think, was Tanner Pearson. I mean, he was very good friends with Miller, and he sat beside Petey in the dressing room. And I thought his absence the following year really hurt. And I mean,
and that's because they botched his hand.
They botched his hand a couple times, so he was never around the team. But I think so he couldn't play. He didn't start out having a good year. Let's make no bones about it. I mean, he struggled early, but then in Montreal he broke his hand, and then they botched that up, or I don't really know what happened, but I assume because they had to go in and fix it again, he was gone for the year. And this was, I think, about game 13 that he had gotten hurt. I thought that his absence was a real big absence because he was a veteran. He'd won 2 cups and, was a calming influence on everything. So I think that was really a big miss there.
Let's say we are in these conversations. We'll throw it back to that summer where, the meetings that Rachel's in, where we're trying to figure out, okay, who do we sign here, JT or Bo? Who do you keep? Miller or Pettersson, because it doesn't really seem like there is a world where these two can coexist consistently, at least moving forward.
Well, I think they're both great players. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I've said this to every media outlet that's had me. I think Petey's as skilled and as good as anybody. Miller is, if you wanted a player that could put you over the top right now for the remainder of this season, and and you were close to winning the cup, I think he could be that player that puts you over the top. I mean, not that Petey couldn't, but I mean, Petey's got 6 more years after this one. Miller's got, I think, 3 or 4 more years, whatever. It's a couple years less, and there's a big age difference. So, I mean, I think if it was a for now thing, Miller, if it's for future, if it was Buffalo or so, then you'd want to go for Pettersson, because I don't think Buffalo's winning the cup this year. And I don't even know if either one of them are even interested in the trade. But those are just the way the dynamics work of these two players. I think they both want the toughest jobs. I remember the preseason game in Abbotsford, for example, that first year. I mean, we ended up winning it 5-4. But Petey came up to me before the game and says, I want to play against McDavid. Quinn Hughes said, I want to play against McDavid all night long. And so, I mean, I gave them that tasks. I mean, and then against Colorado the year before, I said, Miller, you're on McKinnon all night long. And he did an outstanding job giving him that role. So, I mean, but they both want the same job. They both want to be the top power play guy. They both want to be the guy that gets the puck. They both want to be the guy in the last minute. And sometimes that's tough when both guys want the same thing all the time.
When you want guys on your team, like as a coach, you want guys on your team that want that role. The last thing I think you'd want is somebody coming to you and going, I don't want that role. Like, don't give me that.
No.
I'd rather have a guy that wants that, right?
100%. But, I mean, I think, and who knows, I have no idea. If one of them gets it, the other one gets jealous, and vice versa. That might be something that's caused a little bit of the friction, but I'm not saying it is, because I don't really know.
Well, speaking of friction, Rachel's time with the Canucks. I think there was a good amount of friction there. Although there was a lot of happiness. And specifically, I remember, Rachel and I, we've been friends for a long time. I went through this process with her, and I gotta say, I think maybe the happiest I've ever seen her is the day that she got hired by the Vancouver Canucks, and she was joining that organization. Let's do a little, I guess, sort of post-mortem job interview with Rachel, or sort of performance evaluation. What attracted you to hiring her, and what did you see? What did she add to your staff? Because I didn't by the way, I just want to make it clear, she totally cut me off from any information behind the scenes. I want to make that very clear. She was not leaking anything, so I have no idea.
Well, to be frank, and I mean, if I'm wrong, Rachel, you let me know here. We didn't know that Rachel's hired until the draft. And that's when I met her for the first time, was at the draft. This was a Jim hiring, I think. I don't know who else.
Yeah, Jim hired me before he hired Cammie, Emily, Patrick. Like, he hired Derek, like Clance.
Yeah.
And then he hired me. And then I didn't get to, we weren't talking about me joining your staff. Well, Jim brought it up to me at the trade deadline. Hey, we'd like you to join Bruce's staff heading into next season. So then we go to the draft, and I remember saying to Jim, I'm not okay with that unless Bruce wants me on his staff.
And to be honest, we didn't know. We didn't know till training camp whether she was going to be. We knew she was. We'd heard that she was going to be with us, but it wasn't. It wasn't verified, and then until training camp, and then unfortunately for her, she didn't know her role, right? Like, I don't think, because it wasn't brought up to anyone. It's just, Rachel's here. And I mean, when I first started noticing that she was pretty good, like, at first, to be honest, everybody thought, hey, is she Jim's spy? That was the thing that we were worried about. But then you get to know her, and if you needed something, knowledge right away, she had it. She had it on the computer. Boom, boom, boom. So the longer we went, and like I said, we were there a month, that you knew that she knew what she was talking about. She was just not some ditzy that Jim liked. I mean, it was, she had her hockey knowledge down pat. So it seemed like when we were going to Whistler, there was words, there was things that, like, I had no idea of what was going on behind the scenes and everything. But I do know that the one thing that was told to me was, hey, if she ever does anything wrong, you come up and tell me. And I went, well, yeah, okay, but what are you talking about? Why are we doing this? And then the next thing we knew, there was something happening, and she was getting let go. We weren't really in on it at all. But the crazy thing is, we were just getting sort of settled in as a staff, and we were getting along, and we were all coming to work, and it was like when we had to say goodbye, all the coaches went downstairs to say goodbye. There was no animosity between the coaches. We were all sort of shocked that this was happening and didn't get it. And I still don't get it, and I still know that there's some things going on there, but I have no idea what. One of these days, I'm going to sit down with her and find out exactly what is going on and have knowledge myself. But I just knew that when she was going home, that we met her downstairs in the lobby, if you recall, and
Yep.
that she was going home. And it's like, what do we say now? Like, I mean, we'll see it when we see it type thing. And that was it. So,
But I remember in Whistler, there was this point where all of this stuff was going on, and you looked at me and you were like, you look terrible. And it was just after I had one of the hard episodes, and we were talking about me like needing to go to the doctor and not being able to go and see a doctor because we had camp. And then all of a sudden I get back, and I just get, basically I disappear outside of that, like called out of meetings, that kind of thing. And I mean, I look back at it now and I'm like, I've come to find out that you guys tried to stand up for me, and I appreciate that. But I always kind of felt that, like, they never even gave the staff a chance to actually go to bat for somebody who was working with them. They just kind of, like, the management just said, nope, we're just going to get rid of her.
well, I think I mean, I don't know, I'll be honest, and you're here and you know I like you. I don't know what happened. That's the way it happened. And I remember telling Jim, I said, you know what, it's too bad, because I think she really knew her shit. And he said, yeah, it's too bad. And that was my extent of my conversation on any of your matter, because it was one of those things I didn't think we were really allowed to dig deep into, and so we didn't.
It's still a persona non grata in that building. I feel like you and I are both in that boat at this point,
Well,
which is insane, because, I mean, the way that they, like, I thought I got treated poorly, but the way they treated you on the way out made my blood boil. Like, I was more angry about that than what happened to me. Like, I was so upset.
like, I really didn't. I knew that things had been said on the radio and in the paper and all of these things, but I don't read it, and I didn't listen to it. And I mean, I was just focused on the team. So I mean, it was I was letting it go in one ear and out the other. I mean, I would use Stan Smeal as a confidant, and because he was the one I trusted, and saying what's going on here and everything else. But nobody really knew a lot at that point, except I knew that I was being gone, and I knew what day I was getting fired. I knew what moment I was getting fired. It was funny that there was not a lot of transparency in it, and but it happened, and it's an experience that I thought was good and bad at the same time. I enjoyed, loved my time with the Canucks, with the fans, with the team when we were going well, even when we weren't going well. I mean, if you look at the next year, they changed 10 different players on that team, but I mean, they never quit, and they kept trying, whether we were good enough or not, or whether the coaching was bad or not, I don't know. But they kept trying, and I give kudos to the team for that.
It's funny that you mentioned Stan, because after everything that happened, it was interesting because Stan was the only executive not in the office when everything with me was happening. And notably, and I mean, let's face it, the guy's number is retired in the rafters. He is a legend in that organization and completely untouchable. He was the only person outside of obviously the coaching staff that was a member of management to reach out to me and just say, like, I'm sorry, check in how I was doing, that kind of thing. And it's funny that you say that Stan was kind of a confidant, because Stan was somebody I also really trusted. And it was really nice that I could also always just go to Stan and be like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What are your thoughts on this? Or I had this conversation. I'm not really sure how to take it. Or there was an issue with like scouts and stuff like that. And I would go to Stan and I would say, hey, like, how would you handle this? And I felt that he was somebody where I could go and it was safe. Like, he wasn't going to go and run to anybody else and say, oh, I had this conversation. I think somebody like that is really important in every organization. And I wonder if losing him has harmed the Canucks in terms of how they have discussions about players, make decisions, because he kind of always seemed like the balancing effect on that organization.
He's a fabulous man. And if you lose a fabulous man, I don't care how good your organization is, your organization suffers, because there's not enough great people. I thought Stan, who I didn't know before, other than playing junior against him in the Memorial Cup and knowing his career, because I mean, he was such a steadfast Canuck but getting to know him was outstanding. And when you lose somebody like that for whatever reason, and I think it hurts your organization because you don't get anybody. They're irreplaceable guys, but. Anyway,
so I'll have one last thing. You know, it's the, I guess it's the topic of the day, obviously, and I'm sure you obviously get asked about this person a lot. But you know, Alexander Ovechkin, he had his best years under you. You know, all of that. First of all, what's it like coaching a guy like that? I mean, I know that's the most basic question. I'm sure you've been asked that a million times, but
you know what? He was a normal guy. He was a young hockey player that just wanted to play hockey. I mean, he was only 22 when I first got him. And, I mean, full of piss and vinegar, had energy to burn, was absolutely a great player. Every time us and Pittsburgh played, it was a special, iconic moment when Crosby and Ovi were
little Freudian slip there, huh?
Yeah. Hey, those two could be almost in the same sentence as him. But, I mean, it's interesting. The pressure is mounting. The goals aren't coming as quick for him right now. And when I say the pressure is mounting, I mean, I don't think he takes it as pressure. He wants to play at every game. He looks happy. The team is outstanding. It's got a great hockey club there. But I think like with the attention it gets harder. I know he wants to break it this year. I don't think he wants to go through a summer of being asked those questions again. And another summer where he'd have to come back and, you know, whether he wants to finish out the last year of his contract or break the record, win the cup and call it a day, I have no idea. I just know that I believe he wants to break it this year. He's 20 away. I think Spencer will give him every chance in the world to break it. All they need to do for sure is get 21 more one-goal games, and he'll get in there for the empty netter, worst-case scenario. But he was a great guy to coach. I was lucky to coach him. I was lucky that I can tell my grandkids and even my children and my friends that, you know, I have no problem answering that question because it was an honor to coach the guy. And not too many people get a chance to say, I coached Wayne Gretzky, or I coached Gordie Howe, or I coached Bobby Orr, but I put Ovi in those same Mount Rushmore type icons that those guys are. Like, I mean, I've answered the question a few times and said, well, can he ever get into the Mount Rushmore, and meaning the four presidents? And I'm saying, you know what? Mount Rushmore is just going to have to create more statues, because nobody's going to take those 4 guys. You just got to, when Crosby and Ovechkin retire, now all of a sudden there's going to be 6 guys, and who knows, that mountain will get bigger when McDavid retires, and who knows after that. But those guys are etched in stone. We just need to add more to it.
I think the craziest thing about Mount Rushmore is it just looks like that. No one even carved it. It's just nature. It's crazy.
Seriously? Is that no? That can't be.
I'm kidding.
Okay, good.
But one of the most defining images recently I've seen of Alexander Ovechkin. You know, he's the guy. He's 20 goals away from being literally the greatest goal scorer in the history of the National Hockey League. If you want to say history of all hockey, absolutely. And yet he's walking to a plane to the team plane with a foot-long Subway sub and a bag of Cheetos. And keep in mind, this is an elite premier athlete. You know, he's about to be potentially the greatest guy to ever do the number one thing that is important in this sport. Did he always eat like that? Or is that something, is that recent?
No, I mean, he's about as normal a kid as you want to find. One of the reasons everybody loves him is he's like a kid. He'll sit down and play video games for hours with you. Like, I mean, or watch hockey or what have you. But I mean, I remember him coming to Iota charities, and one of the charities was a dinner with Alex Ovechkin, and we went to the Capitol Grill, and he went in there and he had 2 steaks and baked potato and a couple beers to go with it, and he was just about as normal as a man could get, and he's big. He's a big man. Like, I mean, he's 230 pounds plus, and but it's not those size. His body, his knees are twice the size of a normal knee. His thighs are twice the size of a normal thigh. He's just, he's one of those guys that break all these records because he's got something special in him. And size, intelligence, shot, all of those things add up to being a superstar or above superstar.
The thing I love about it is you have all these hockey players that are watching what they eat and measuring things to like the slimmest of margins, and this guy's just having 2 steaks and a beer and everything. So you're coaching Alex Ovechkin, and I mean, at this point, it's clear that this guy is special and that he's going to do great things. You're coaching him, you have him on the power play, it's pretty automatic. But when you go on in your career and you're coaching against Alex Ovechkin and you know the power play situation is coming, everybody does, no one's been able to stop it. What is it about Ovechkin and the way he sets up or shoots the puck or whatever it is that makes that Ovi's office just an unstoppable thing to the point where no penalty kill has been able to solve for it? Is there something that's just like, hey, it just is what it is? Like, what could that be?
Well, every team has tried different ways to stop it. And but the thing is, and it's a little tougher for him now, but when he was younger, he would shoot he shot the puck more than any player, almost twice as much as any player in the NHL. So if he missed the net 5 times and he hit the net 5 times, 1 or 2 of them were going to go in because his shot was special. You know, in All-Star games, he never won the hardest shot. But I mean, if you had to watch him shoot the puck, he got it away quicker than anybody. The torque on the stick, you wouldn't know where it was going. And I mean, it's an amazing shot. And he knows exactly where it's going. And he can set up the shot to make a pass. It's special. That power play, I would know how to stop it when I was coaching against him, but he'd still score, and he'd come over and he'd wink at me, and I'd get pissed off at him, shake my fist at him, and he says, no problem, coach, I get 2 tonight, I get 3 tonight. And I'd go, get out of here, I don't want to talk to you, you're not on my team anymore. So...
He's truly something else. Are you going to be around, like, are you going to kind of follow him when he gets close to the record within a couple goals so you can be there on the night that he breaks it? How is that happening here?
I'm sure they will have me there because I do the pre and post games, for them. So, I mean, I do about 50% of their pre and post, but I got to believe that it's not me making the scheduling, but when he gets close to it, I got to think that they're going to have me doing the pre and post games just because of the relationship.
That makes sense. Bruce, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show and chatting hockey and breaking everything down and being able to have conversations that we wouldn't normally get to have if we would have been in our previous job. So I really appreciate it, and I get to now publicly say thank you for giving me an opportunity to be on your staff. It was absolutely wonderful to work with you for the short time that I got to. And I mean, even in that short time, I learned a ton, and I'm really appreciative of everything that has come of that.
Well, Rach, it was a pleasure having you. And I look forward to seeing you involved in hockey for a long time coming. And I'm sure that I might get the opportunity to see you in New Jersey when I'm working at the NHL Network there, and you're there quite often. So, I mean, I look forward to that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bruce.